Somewhere tonight, in a paid-off house, sits a man the system has flagged as untrustworthy. Not because he stole something, not because he lied on a form, because he owes nobody a single dollar, and a system built on debt does not know what to do with a man like that. You know this feeling, even if you have never put words to it. You did everything you were told. You paid the mortgage down early instead of taking the vacation. You drove the same car for 12 years while your neighbor leased a new one every 3. You said no to the kitchen renovation, no to the boat, no to the credit card rewards program that promised you points for spending money you did not have. And somewhere along the way, without ever being told directly, you started to suspect that the rules you followed were not actually designed to reward you. They were designed to reward the version of you that never showed up, the version that kept spending, the version that stayed in the machine. Let me tell you about a man named Roy Kessler. Roy is 61 years old. He spent 34 years as a machinist, the kind of job where your hands tell the story before your mouth does. He paid off his house in Toledo, Ohio, 11 years ago, in a lump sum after his wife passed and the life insurance came through. He never took out a second mortgage. He never carried a balance on a credit card because he never got one. He paid for his truck in cash, a decision that took him 4 years of saving, and felt, on the day he signed the title, like the proudest moment of his adult life. 2 years ago, Roy's daughter needed him close during her second pregnancy. He decided to rent a small apartment near her for 6 months, something simple, something temporary. The property manager ran his application and came back with a single word: denied. Not for bad credit. Roy had no credit file at all. No history for a machine to read. To the system that decides who gets to rent an apartment in this country, a man who has never owed anyone anything looks exactly like a ghost, and a ghost cannot be trusted with a lease. Sit with that for a second. The man who spent 4 decades keeping every promise he ever made was rejected by an algorithm that only understands promises that were broken and then kept. Meanwhile, across town, a 32-year-old carrying $40,000 in revolving credit card debt was approved for the same building that same afternoon because he had a score, because he had a pattern of borrowing and repaying that the system could read like a language it trusted. The system did not care that Roy was reliable. It cared that Roy was invisible. And invisibility to the machine that runs your financial life does not look like freedom. It looks like risk. This is not a story about bad luck. This is a story about design. And once you understand who designed it and why, you will never look at your own credit score, your own mortgage, your own monthly payment the same way again. The trap Roy walked into did not start with him. It started decades ago, in rooms he was never invited into, built by people who understood something most of us were never taught. A man who owes nothing generates no revenue. A man who owes nothing cannot be charged interest, cannot be assessed a late fee, cannot be sold a consolidation loan to fix a problem he does not have. For the lenders who built the modern credit system, a debt-free man is not a success story. He is a customer they have already lost. To understand how deliberately this was built, you have to go back to 2008, to a homeowner named Frank Delgado in a suburb outside Cleveland, in a year that broke something in the American idea of home ownership that has never fully been repaired. Frank was 53 years old that year. He had worked for the same manufacturing supplier for 22 years, and he had done what every financial advisor of his generation told him to do. He took out a home equity line of credit against a house he had spent 2 decades paying down, not to buy something frivolous, but to consolidate his daughter's college costs and cover a medical bill his insurance had refused. The bank that issued that line of credit had approved it happily, had in fact encouraged him to take more than he asked for. His home, on paper, was worth $210,000. The equity line gave him access to $60,000 of it. He used about half. In the fall of that year, without warning, without a phone call explaining why, Frank's bank froze the line. Not because he had missed a payment, not because he had done anything wrong. The bank froze thousands of home equity lines across the country simultaneously, citing falling home values in the surrounding area. Values that had not yet fallen in Frank's specific neighborhood, but were falling nationally. And the banks were not taking chances with money they had already extended. Frank had planned around access to funds he had already been approved for. Funds tied to equity he had spent 22 years building. In the span of a single letter, that access disappeared. He was left holding a partially used loan, a locked door, and a mortgage payment that did not care what had just happened to him. Here is what you need to understand about that moment, because it did not end in 2008. The mechanism is identical today. Only the names have changed. The banks that froze those credit lines were not committing some rare one-time betrayal. They were doing exactly what the system was built to let them do. Every home equity line, every credit card limit, every so-called pre-approval you have ever received carries language, buried in paragraphs nobody reads, that allows the lender to reduce it, freeze it, or cancel it entirely for reasons that serve the lender, not you. The access you think you have is not actually yours. It is theirs, on loan, and they can take the loan back whenever their own risk models tell them to. You are not a customer in that relationship. You are a liability they are managing. Think about what that means for the version of financial security you were sold your entire working life. You were told that home equity was safety, that a paid-down mortgage was leverage you could draw on if things went wrong. What 2008 proved, brutally and permanently, is that leverage only exists as long as the institution holding it decides to honor it. Real security was never the equity line. Real security was the man who never needed to draw on one in the first place. That is the mechanism that built the trap you are standing in right now, today, whatever city you live in, whatever your mortgage balance says this month. Every financial product marketed to you as a safety net, the equity line, the low-interest balance transfer, the buy now, pay later plan on your phone, exists first to generate revenue for the institution offering it. Your safety is a secondary concern, honored only when it happens to align with theirs. You are taught to see debt as a tool. It was never a tool for you. You were the tool, and the debt was the handle they used to hold you. Now let me show you how the machine actually runs, mechanically, because once you see the engineering, you cannot unsee it. Every credit score in this country exists to answer one question for a lender, and it is not the question you assume. It does not ask, is this person financially healthy? It asks, is this person a reliable source of interest income? A man who pays off his card in full every month, generating no interest, is often scored lower in practical value to a lender than a man who carries a balance responsibly and pays a little interest every single cycle. The entire architecture rewards managed dependency, not independence. It rewards a borrower the system can keep, not a borrower who pays his obligation off and walks away. This is where a second man enters the story, because Roy's punishment for having no debt is only half the picture. The other half belongs to a man named Gerald Whitfield, 66 years old, a corporate purchasing manager for 29 years before a restructuring eliminated his department 2 years before he planned to retire. Gerald had done the opposite of Roy. He had trusted the system fully. He carried a mortgage he refinanced twice at what he was told were favorable rates. He kept 2 credit cards active specifically because a financial advisor told him it would help his score. He believed, the way an entire generation was trained to believe, that playing along with the credit system was the responsible thing to do. When the layoff came, Gerald's severance covered 4 months. His mortgage, refinanced at a rate that reset higher after year 7, consumed nearly half of what his pension began paying him. The 2 credit cards he kept active out of obligation to his score carried balances he had never intended to carry, run up during the gap between severance ending and his pension beginning. Gerald did not fail through recklessness. He failed through faithful, obedient participation in a system that told him participation was safety. Roy was punished for opting out completely. Gerald was punished for staying all the way in. Between the 2 of them, there's no safe amount of trust to place in this machine. There is only the amount of exposure you are willing to accept. Here's the part that should make you angry. The system did not fail Roy and Gerald by accident. It succeeded exactly as it was built to. A man who owes nothing generates nothing for the machine. So the machine marks him unreadable and pushes him to the margins. A man who owes something reliably becomes a permanent revenue stream, so the machine rewards him with access, right up until the moment it decides his risk outweighs his usefulness, and then it closes the door on him too. There is no version of full participation that ends in safety. There is only a choice between being invisible to the system or being useful to it until you are not. And this is where the deeper truth sits, the one that connects every part of what you have just heard back to something older than credit scores, older than banks, older than money itself. The reason a debt-free man unsettles a room is not about his bank account. It is about what his bank account tells you about him. A man who owes nothing needs nothing from you. He cannot be pressured by a collector, cannot be threatened by a repossession, cannot be manipulated by the fear of a dropping score, because none of those levers have anything left to grip. That absence of leverage is not just financial. It changes how a man carries himself in a room, how he negotiates a salary, how he responds when a boss threatens his job security, and how steady his handshake is when someone tries to rattle him. That posture you have noticed in certain older men, the ones who never seem to need anything from anyone, who command a room without raising their voice, who carry an authority that younger, louder men in expensive suits cannot buy. That posture is not a personality trait. It is math wearing a calm face. A man who does not need the loan, does not need the promotion, does not need the approval of the room, is a man the room cannot control. Social authority and financial sovereignty were never 2 separate things. They are the same posture, viewed from 2 different angles. And the moment you understand that, you understand why the system worked so hard for so long to make sure ordinary men never carried it. So what does a man do with this once he sees it clearly? Not a checklist, not 3 easy steps a video promises and never delivers. Something closer to a decision about identity, made quietly and kept. You are going to spend the rest of your life inside a system that profits from your participation and punishes your exit. That will not change because you watched one video, and it will not change because a politician promises to fix it. What changes is smaller than that and more permanent. It is the moment you stop asking the system to validate you and start asking only whether you need it at all. Roy did not get his apartment that day, but Roy also did not spend that night wondering how he was going to make a payment he could not afford. Gerald made every payment on time for 29 years, and it did not save him the one time the machine turned against him. There is a version of security in this world that the system can revoke with a letter, and there is a version it can never touch because it never had a hold on it to begin with. Only one of those is real. You do not need the machine to certify you. You do not need a 3-digit number to tell you what you already know about your own reliability. The score was never measuring your character. It was measuring your usefulness to people who profit from your dependency, and a man who stops needing their validation becomes a man they cannot price, cannot leverage, cannot quietly punish through a letter in the mail. He becomes ungovernable in the one way that actually matters. Choose invisibility. Choose independence. Choose the quiet exit nobody applauds because nobody profits from it. Can't collect from him. Can't threaten him. Can't leverage him. Can't own him. That is not failure to participate. That is the only version of freedom the system was never designed to allow, and the only version it has never figured out how to take back. The door was never locked. You just never thought to try it.